Hey guys, I never imagined I'd be standing here talking about this, but honestly, it's been a journey, a crazy, beautiful, kinda unbelievable journey. I started out just being that girl in the background. No one really took me seriously. People had their opinions, their assumptions, and trust me, they weren't cute, but I didn't let that stop me. I turned every doubt into fuel, every no into watch me, and now, from being underestimated to becoming a billionaire. Yeah, that happened, and I'm here to share how I did it. Not just the glam parts, but the hard work, the hustle, and everything in between. Because if I can do it, why not you? In the beginning, no one really knew who I was, at least not in a way that gave me any real respect. People saw me in the background of other people's stories, and they made assumptions about who I was, what I was about, and what I could or couldn't do. It's wild how quick the world is to box you in. You get one moment that goes viral, one story that people think they know, and suddenly they feel like they've figured you out completely. But they hadn't, not even close, and I knew I had to take back that control, not just for me, but for every girl who's ever felt underestimated or misread. It wasn't easy. I didn't wake up one morning and say, okay, today I'm going to flip the narrative. It was a long process. It started with small, intentional steps. I had to be really clear with myself. Who do I want to be? What do I want to be known for? What kind of legacy do I want to leave? I realized that if I didn't define my story, someone else would. And trust me, they would not be kind. That meant stepping into the spotlight not just as someone people talked about, but as someone who controlled the conversation. There were so many people who thought I didn't have depth, or intelligence, or talent. And sure, I get it. When you first see someone in a tabloid or on a reality show, you don't immediately think billion-dollar businesswoman. But that's the problem with assumptions. They miss the behind the scenes, the long nights, the constant planning, the hard decisions, the risks, the failures, and the self-discipline it takes to keep going. I didn't just wake up and become someone with a brand. I built that brand brick by brick, and part of building it was learning how to own who I was, even the parts people judged. I've learned that the most powerful thing you can do is be unapologetically yourself. Not in a loud or aggressive way, but in a calm, clear, grounded way. I didn't need to scream to be heard. I just needed to be consistent. Every time someone thought I was just famous for being famous, I'd quietly outwork their expectations. I'd launch a business. I'd partner with someone strategic. I'd rebrand something people mocked into something people respected. I didn't do it for the applause. I did it because I had a vision, a bigger picture. And that picture didn't include letting other people's opinions be louder than my own truth. People love a success story, but they forget that most of it happens in private. The real work happens when no one's watching. It's in the moments where you doubt yourself but keep going. When you hear criticism that stings, but you don't let it shut you down. When you keep showing up day after day until your name means more than a headline. It stands for something. That's what I aimed for. That's what I fought for. Taking control of your story doesn't mean pretending everything's perfect. It means being honest about where you came from, clear about where you're headed, and bold enough to say, this is who I am, and this is what I bring to the table. When you stop waiting for people to give you permission to shine, you start realizing you had the spotlight all along. You just needed to stand still and own it. In the early days, fame felt like noise, loud, chaotic, and not always flattering. Everyone had something to say about me, but no one was asking me what I wanted to say. My name was in the headlines, my image was everywhere, but I realized really quickly that being famous doesn't automatically mean you have control. You can be visible and still feel invisible in your own narrative. That's when I understood something powerful. I had to turn all that attention into something intentional. I couldn't just be a name people recognized. I needed to become a brand people respected. I didn't have a traditional path to business. I didn't go to an Ivy League school. I didn't start with a business degree or a boardroom full of mentors. What I had was instinct, hustle, and a ridiculous amount of work ethic. I paid attention to the world around me, to what people were talking about, what they were buying, and what they were looking for but couldn't find. I saw gaps in the market, especially when it came to fashion, beauty, and lifestyle, and I knew I could fill them. Not just because I liked those things, but because I lived them. I was the customer before I was the founder. That gave me an edge. One of the biggest myths people believe is that success is about one big moment. Like you launch something, it goes viral, and boom, you've made it. But that's not real. Every product I put out, every partnership I signed, every decision I made was backed by 1,000 hours of thought, strategy, and sometimes trial and error. I studied everything: packaging, branding, pricing, tone of voice, market timing. It all mattered. I surrounded myself with smart people, asked a million questions, and never pretended to know it all. Ego doesn't build empires. Curiosity and commitment do. There were moments where I could have just settled for the attention. I could have stayed in that lane doing endorsements, red carpets, and magazine covers, and called it a day. But I didn't want to just be famous. I wanted to own something, to create something that had real value, something that could stand on its own even if the cameras went away. That's when I started building businesses that aligned with my personal identity but could exist beyond it. Whether it was shapewear, skincare, or fragrances, I treated each brand like its own world. Every piece had to feel personal, but also professional, relatable, but aspirational. That balance is everything. It was also important to me that I didn't just put my name on things. I was in the meetings, in the design process, in the branding decisions. I knew that if I was going to ask people to trust my products, I had to trust myself first. And that meant doing the work. There's a big difference between slapping your name on a product and building something from the ground up. I wanted to be in the second category because long-term respect comes from real involvement, not just visibility. Turning fame into a business wasn't about escaping who I was. It was about expanding it. I took the parts of my identity that people judged or underestimated and flipped them into power. People called me vain, so I launched beauty. They called me superficial, so I built $1 billion brand around self, confidence, and body inclusivity. They called me lucky, and I just kept working until luck looked a lot more like strategy. Every criticism became fuel. Every spotlight became a platform, and every headline became an opportunity to redirect the story on my terms. In the beginning, staying consistent was one of the hardest things to do, especially when almost no one truly believed in me. People thought they had me figured out from the start. They looked at one version of my story and decided it would be the whole book. They said I was only relevant because of my family, or my past, or because I was lucky to be famous. But what they didn't see was how much effort it took just to keep showing up when every headline wanted to tear me down. Consistency wasn't just a business strategy. It became a survival skill. There were so many times I could have let the criticism stop me. There were moments of self-doubt, moments where I questioned if it was even worth it to keep trying to prove myself. But I made a decision early on. I wouldn't stop just because people didn't get it. If I wanted a real future, I couldn't wait for the perfect moment or for people to suddenly cheer me on. I had to create those moments myself, one small step at a time. I didn't try to become something overnight. I just focused on being better, clearer, more intentional with every project, every launch, every move. Even when I had success, I didn't let it slow me down. That's something a lot of people don't understand. Getting a little recognition can be a trap if you start believing that's enough. I never let one magazine cover, one product drop, or one trending moment define me, I always asked myself, what's next? How can I evolve? How do I take this to the next level? Because I knew that real longevity only comes when you keep delivering, even when no one's watching. Even when the hype dies down, that's when your consistency really gets tested, when the excitement fades and all that's left is the work. I stayed focused on the long game. I knew it wasn't about impressing people for a moment. It was about creating something that could last for years, maybe even decades. That meant saying no to a lot of distractions. I had to block out the noise, the opinions, the pressure to be everything to everyone. I couldn't let myself be pulled in 100 directions just to stay relevant. I had to trust my vision and stick with it, even if it didn't pay off right away. Sometimes the rewards came later, but they came because I didn't quit. There's something really powerful about showing up, again and again, even when no one claps for you. It teaches you resilience. It builds character. It helps you develop an inner confidence that doesn't depend on validation. That kind of consistency creates momentum, and that momentum is what pushes you through the hard seasons, through the failures, and even through the successes, because you start to realize that each day matters. Every decision, every habit, every effort, it all adds up. I learned to stop chasing perfection and instead chase progress. Some days I nailed it, some days I didn't, but I showed up anyway. I kept building, kept learning, kept evolving. And slowly, people started to take notice, not because I screamed for attention, but because I stayed in the game when most people would have walked away. I didn't need overnight success. I needed long-term impact. And I knew the only way to get that was to keep going, no matter what anyone else thought. Consistency didn't just shape my brand, it shaped who I am. When I started building something of my own, I knew I didn't want it to just look successful. I wanted it to be successful. There's a big difference. A lot of people are focused on looking the part, showing off the lifestyle, and posting the wins. But behind the scenes, there's no real structure, no real growth. I didn't want to live like that. I wanted something real, something solid. So I built everything, my businesses, my partnerships, my image on a foundation of style, strategy, and self-worth. And I was fully involved in every layer of that process. Style was always a part of my identity. Fashion, beauty, the aesthetics, those things weren't just hobbies. They were expressions of who I was. And I knew how much power came from feeling good in your skin, from wearing something that made you walk a little taller. I took what people thought was superficial and turned it into something empowering. Shapewear wasn't just about looking a certain way. It was about feeling confident in your body. Skincare wasn't just about beauty. It was about self-care. Every product I created had to serve a deeper purpose, and that's where the strategy came in. I never put something out into the world without asking 1,000 questions. Who is this for? How will it make people feel? What's missing in the market? And how can we fill that gap in a way that's honest and valuable? I wasn't interested in quick sales or trendy launches that would fade in a month. I wanted longevity. I wanted people to trust my brand, not just try it once and forget about it. That meant every move had to be intentional. Every campaign, every collaboration, every rollout had to align with the bigger vision. I wasn't just selling a product. I was building a world. But even with the best style and strategy, none of it would have mattered if I didn't have self-worth. I had to believe I deserved a seat at the table, even when people thought I didn't. That confidence didn't come overnight. It came from working hard, learning from mistakes, and refusing to let outside opinions shrink my ambition. I reminded myself constantly that I wasn't just creating for the moment. I was creating for the future, and to do that, I had to value myself even when others didn't. That belief in myself became the blueprint for everything I built. It's easy to question yourself when you're doing something different. People doubted me at every stage. They said I wasn't serious. They said I couldn't run a real business. They thought I was just lucky. But luck doesn't build empires, And style alone doesn't create billion-dollar brands. You need vision, you need grit. You need to show up every single day with a mindset that says, I know my worth and I'm going to prove it, not through words, but through results. That mindset helped me push past fear, past failure, and even past success that could have made me too comfortable. I didn't want to be a one-hit wonder. I wanted to be someone who changed the game, who made it okay for women to be ambitious, glamorous, and strategic all at the same time. I wanted to break the idea that you had to choose between being respected and being yourself. Why not have both? Why not build something powerful and still love beauty, love fashion, love expressing yourself? I realized the real flex wasn't choosing between those things. It was owning them all and turning them into something unstoppable. That's how I built my empire, with a clear vision, unshakable self, worth, and the belief that I could create something lasting by being fully, unapologetically me.